I'd like to call the October Planning Commission for Schuylkill Township meeting to order. I'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight's meeting is being live streamed and videotaped, so want to make everybody aware of that. If we could silence cell phones so we don't have cell phones ringing and so on throughout the meeting, that would be great. I think we're going to set a hard stop at 10:30, if everybody agrees to that. So we're not here all night. And what? Okay. Okay. So the next thing I would like to do is the approval of the meeting minutes from September 21st.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
A second.
Second. Any comments from the planning commission members?
They were well detailed.
Yeah.
Good job, Kim.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Sedgley Farms, Reeves Tract, and Select Sites, East Phillips Drive, are on the agenda tonight. This is an older project that's coming back around. So I think we'll ask the applicant to do their presentation. I think we'll start off with the Select Sites one, and then the township engineer will go through the letter, hitting the highlights, the high points that, you know, might be a sticking point. We don't need to go through, I think, every comment that's going to be a will comply, or, you know, if there's a discussion point, we can discuss that. And the planning commission will entertain questions from the planning commission, and then we'll let the public speak on that one, and then we'll tackle the bigger one second. Step up to the microphone and introduce yourself. And
thank you. You on here?
Is it on?
Working? Okay, thanks. Good evening. I'm Todd Polich, president of Polich Builders, equitable owner under agreement of sale with respect to the 65-acre Reeves property, which is highlighted in the yellowish on the screen there. I'm also representing Select Sites, owner of the 1 acre property at less than 1 acre property at 876 East Phillips Drive, and that's just to the left of. This is 876 East Phillips Drive. So the project.
Why don't you take the mic?
It's portable.
Portable?
Yeah, you can take it right up.
Guess it's a good thing I'm not chewing gum at the same time here. Okay. I'll try to stay to the side here so it's okay on TV. Also from our development team here, we have John Snyder, our land use attorney, and also Jeremy Mazar from Chester Valley Engineers, who's our project civil engineer for the project. The project is a 51-lot single-family development encompassing a little over 66 acres. As I mentioned, is this the Reeves property, which is in yellow, and the 876 East Phillips Drive. There are 4 existing residents on the property, 1 on East Phillips, and there are 3 on the Reeves property, which are the William Reeves home, which is eligible to be on the historic register. There's a carriage home on the property and a tenant house back end of Lot 19. It's located adjacent to Pickering Reservoir. Just a note, north is oriented to the right. Generally, plans are north up. On this, because of the shape of the property, north is to your right. It's, the property is accessed from Valley Forge Road to the north and East Phillip Drive to the west. It's located in the R1 zoning district. It abuts R2 zoning on the northwest. Both this East Phillip area and the Wells Road are R2 zoning, and on the northeast, Dorchester is R1 zoning. As kind of brief background, as was mentioned earlier, we last left off on this project about 13 years ago, a little over 13 years. On January 29th, 2009, we received Planning Commission recommendation for approval for this plan, utilizing the alternate layout, which is sheet number 43 of 48 of the plan set. The Planning Commission recommended waivers for a T versus a Y intersection at the intersection of Sedgley and Eagle Farm, or Eagle Road. And they also recommended narrower widths for the cartways, 28 foot and 24 foot. The Planning Commission also recommended a private connection to East Phillip Drive with a posted private entrance off of East Phillip. And resort-style entry features to distinguish it from a public road. The township engineer at the time, Gilmore and Associates, also recommended preliminary approval with granting the requested waivers for the alternate plan. The supervisors were due to make a decision a month later at their February 4th, 2009 meeting. However, before that meeting, I received a call from Supervisor Jim Morrison on behalf of the supervisors, asking if I would hold off on the plan's approval and consider working with the township on a cluster plan. That was going to be along the lines of a previous sketch that we presented to the township in September of 2005. So in September of 2005, we went over a couple ideas for cluster development of this with open space, and that didn't get anywhere, so we went ahead and filed for our 50, at the time it was a 56 lot plan. So we worked with a team at the township that included the township manager, the township engineer, a member of the supervisors, and a member of the planning commission. And we took several plan concepts to the planning commission, historical commission, the EAC, and the open space committee. A number of different plans that we came up with, we were working on the property. The township also considered input from their consultants. For instance, Tom Committa introduced some small village lots as we were taking a look at those cluster concepts. The result was, after several iterations, a consensus on what we call Plan J. It was a 94 lot PRD plan with 3 housing types, about 35% open space on the property. The team overwhelmingly considered that was the best concept for development of the property, considering the traffic impact, school impacts, environmental impacts, historical impact, and the direct neighbor impact. And it added a new empty nester housing alternative for the community. In order to move that forward, the township created a planned residential development PRD zoning ordinance and a district that specifically accommodated Plan J, and that was approved in November of 2013. That was about 5 years after we were asked to put the by right plan on hold. So it took us about 5 years to get ahead and get that concept ready. So at this point, two PRD plans had been initiated. The first was Sedgley Farm, and that was identical in almost every respect to Plan J. Had 94 lots with minimal development on the north side of the property in deference to the adjacent neighbors. The property, we call the north side of the property, there's a figure of the reservoir that sort of bisects the property, so this is considered the north side and considered that the south side. A second plan, Eagles Point, was another PRD plan under the ordinance, and that was again 94 lots, but that had limited development on the south side, somewhat equal to the by right plan that we're looking at right now. Both those plans have been turned down by the township. So tonight, we are re-engaging the by right 51 lot plan that we were asked to put on hold back in 2009. The plan is subject to the 2006 zoning and subdivision ordinances, as the application for this was made in May 22nd, 2006.
Wow.
A minor plan adjustment was made to the plan dated 10/12/08 to allow for an increased setback from the reservoir. We had an agreement with Aqua for a 75-foot setback from the reservoir, but the state has now, I guess we're at 150 foot now. It's a new state requirement. That did not affect the layout at all, just some minor adjustments of the stormwater management and house locations. Other than the previously obtained special exceptions and waiver associated with a stream crossing, no other waivers are required for this plan. Should the township be interested in the alternate layout, which was sheet 43, additional neighbor design waivers will be required. Again, that was cartway widths, the stormwater management ordinance, curbs, setbacks from easements, cul-de-sac length, and street tree locations, not the number of trees, but the locations. We are currently updating our traffic study with new counts, our wetland study, and new PIND clearance letters, and we'll be re-engaging planning modules as well, because it's been a while since we did that. At the end of last Friday, we received a review letter from your township engineer, Paul, at T&M Associates, and I guess that's maybe where we'll go ahead and start. Answer any questions.
Okay.
Answer any questions.
Paul,
Certainly.
start with the select sites and, try to just hit the,
So yes, so starting with the select sites, which is the subdivision application for the lot on
right
East
one?
Phillips Drive. We did complete a review letter as referenced by the applicant, and there are multiple comments in this letter. They are enumerated, and one of particular note that I would like to bring up is comment number D9, which is located on page number 4. And just to read that for anyone that's here, in accordance with Saldo section 502.C.1C1, the secondary feeder street shall be those which are used as connecting and through streets to residential areas and to connect residential streets to collector roads and community facilities with low volumes. They shall have a minimum right-of-way of 60 feet. And I didn't finish the full comment, or the full verbiage from the ordinance. But the reason I'm bringing this up to the Planning Commission's attention is that East Phillip Drive is presently a cul-de-sac. It's accessed off of South White Horse Road. The application for a connection in from the Reeves Tract, which is the second discussion point today, will bring through traffic as well as the residential traffic from the community up East Phillip Drive. East Phillip Drive, like I said, is a cul-de-sac. It's going to be upgraded from a cul-de-sac street classification to a secondary feeder classification for the township. East Phillip Drive, as it presently exists, has a 27-foot wide cartway, so there's 27 feet of pavement and a 50-foot right-of-way. A secondary feeder, which is what would be required, would need a 38-foot cartway, 38 feet of pavement, and a 60-foot right-of-way for East Phillip Drive. So we are taking a existing cul-de-sac, and we're creating trips going through it, obviously from the Reeves track, in addition to the through traffic that will be turning from Valley Forge Road, Route 23, go through Segley Lane, Eagles Point, East Phillip Drive, and then they will be able to bypass a problematic intersection in the township, which is the intersection of 23 and White Horse Pike. So that was, although there are other comments listed in this particular letter, that is the one that I thought of the most concern, that I thought the planning commission would like to hear about.
So there is currently space to create a right-of-way as opposed to a cul-de-sac?
I don't know if I fully understand the question. The current right-of-way is 50 feet wide. It will need to become 60 feet wide, so it'll need to be increased onto all the properties, as well as the cartway is existing at 27 feet wide. That would need to be increased to 38 feet wide to allow for the additional traffic based off of the classification of this.
So this would not impede on private homes?
Yes, it would, because the right-of-way is presently 50 feet.
Their front yard.
So their front yards, there would be 5 feet on both sides.
I see.
So in theory, they're losing 5 feet on each side.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'd
Yeah,
like to
John.
address that because that issue was specifically raised with respect to the PRDs and was decided by the Court of Common Pleas in Chester County. These are residential streets, not residential connector streets. So that issue was shot down by the court.
Okay, thank
So
you.
these can remain as 50-foot wide right-of-ways and not residential connector streets.
Well, the definition of a secondary feeder street are those which are used as connecting and through streets to serve residential areas and to connect residential streets and collector roads.
I understand, that hasn't changed, and that was the same definition as considered by the court. And the court found that these were residential streets, not residential connector streets. So that issue's been decided. We believe that we have a right to remain as 50-foot wide right-of-ways under that court decision.
But the road still needs to be widened.
No.
It stays 27 feet.
Well, but that's an off-site improvement, so that's not an obligation of the applicant. If the township wants to widen it, they can widen it.
I think Bill would like to.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the MPC doesn't permit a township to require off-site improvements. The widening of East Phillip would be an off-site improvement. If you wanted to require off-site improvements, you would have to have an Article 5A plan.
Okay, can you
for
speak
road
that a little
improvements.
bit more in English than legalese, so I can understand what you mean by all that? Honestly, don't know the code by numbers to respond to it.
What the MPC says is that you can require frontage improvements for a property that's being subdivided. You cannot require improvements to be made away from the frontage of that property.
But the stub of East Phillip Drive will have to be made a secondary feeder, so you do
No,
acknowledge.
not a secondary feeder.
It has-
No, it's not. That's what the court said. These roads are all residential streets. There are no secondary feeders with respect to this property, the East Phillip property. They're residential streets. They serve residences.
This is a through road, it's literally in the definition, this is gonna be a through road.
You've lost that case. So it doesn't make any sense to argue it with me. It was decided by the judge.
Yeah, let Bill, could Bill get the microphone?
Which PRD case are you referring to, which decision?
It's the Sedgley Farm one, and there's an unappealed issue in the Sedgley Farm one.
Is the microphone on?
But it's feasible for it to occur.
I don't know, we haven't done anything to it.
In-room amplification isn't very high. Can I follow up?
I'm just a little uncertain. Are you saying that the, whatever happened in the PRD cases, which involved a different ordinance and different layouts, is binding upon this applicant?
I'm saying that the court's interpretation of the definition of secondary feeder street applies with respect to the streets on this tract and serving this tract. That's what they were related to, and the arguments were specifically made to that judge by the intervener in the Sedgley Farm case, and the judge specifically ruled on it.
Did that go to the Commonwealth Court, was that?
That went to the Commonwealth Court, but not that issue. That issue wasn't decided or handled by the Commonwealth Court, wasn't argued by the Commonwealth Court.
I will look into it.
Okay.
Okay.
So as an action, we need to get that verified, right? Well,
Yeah, we'll go through the court case that Mr. Snyder has told us to
Right.
take a look at.
Pretty important piece of this.
Okay. Mr. Polig, and is there any other comments in the review letter that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know this.
You're talking about the select sites one?
Yes.
Yeah, the only one I'd mention is the indication that for some reason the county has a different size on this piece of property. You have the survey, we have the deed, we can provide why the county would have a different number. I have no idea, but we don't care what number they have. It is what it is.
Okay.
Has the, so there's an existing residence there, right? And so this will be next to their residence?
This will be in front of their residence and to the extension to the side. It's a lot. Why don't you show, is there a plan you can put up?
The current lot line for this is this angled piece that's coming from the cul-de-sac to the Reeves property. And what we're doing is providing a right-of-way approximately 50-foot wide. The house will still have frontage on the cul-de-sac, the driveway is on the other side, and the backyard, none of that will change. It's just a connector right-of-way is what Select Site Subdivision is doing, providing a right-of-way to the Reeves property.
Okay.
And it's probably good for you to have some background on this. East Phillip Drive was designed and created to provide access to the Reeves property. The right-of-way, as shown on the original subdivision plan, extended all the way to the Reeves property. The township had the ability for the first 21 years after that plan was created and approved to accept dedication of that right-of-way and extend the road to the Reeves property. It didn't do that, so that the right of the township to extend it expired after 21 years. However, each owner of a lot within that subdivision retained its right to use that right-of-way. Now, in an effort to avoid unnecessary litigation over that, that right-of-way extends 25 feet onto the Select Sites property and 25 feet onto the property to its north. Instead of arguing with that neighbor that we have the right to build that road through that right-of-way as an owner of a lot within that subdivision. We elected to file this plan moving that right-of-way so that all 50 feet of it come from the Select Sites property. That doesn't give up our right to the other 25 feet, but we elected not to get into that battle unnecessarily, since we had more than enough property to be able to add that 25 feet of right-of-way on our side of that original right-of-way for East Phillip Drive.
So that won't be owned by the developer, it'll just be a right-of-way on an existing piece of property.
The plan provides that it's two things. It's a right-of-way which will be offered for dedication to the township, understanding that there's no requirement that a township accept dedication of something offered to it. So in addition to creating it as a right-of-way, which does require subdivision approval, there is no requirement to create of a plan or approval by the municipality to create an easement, but we have indicated by a note on the plan that Select Sites is also granting a 50-foot wide easement to the Reeves property, so that if the township doesn't accept it as a public road, the Reeves property can create it as a private road access to their property. So either way, we're providing the necessary ability to extend that road.
So the bottom line is that what you've taken the time and effort and all the hurdles you've been through to present to us all, is that what you have shared with us is feasible to do?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Why was that originally built as a cul-de-sac if it was envisioned that there would be a road there all along?
I think you're probably gonna have to ask somebody that did it 30 years ago as to why they didn't extend it all the way through. My guess is that they extended it as far as was necessary to serve their lots, but provided the right-of-way to serve and extend into the next property, which is generally the plan. And so, from
And
that
as
standpoint,
people bought properties and built houses there, was it very clear to them that there was a right-of-way there?
well, the plan under which they bought showed it. I don't know we weren't involved in any sale of that or what people were told or not told, but if you looked on the subdivision plan, it clearly went all the way to the Reeves property.
Right. 30 years ago, there may have been a descendant of the Reeves family still living there on the property, and I'm not sure of the specifics, but it was the Reeves private country estate, essentially.
Yeah, and that would not have been unusual planning back then to create how future development would happen in the township. That was considered good planning.
And who established that right-of-way? Would the Reeves have been involved in that? or-
The Reeves were not involved in that.
Okay. Who would
They were a
have,
beneficiary of it.
who would have been involved in that? The township, or, I mean, who benefited from that?
Well, normally what would happen is a developer would come in with a plan, and the Township Planning Commission, the County Planning Commission would indicate that good planning means that you should provide for extension of streets to properties that could be served by it. So that would not have been in any way an unusual feature of a subdivision plan.
Any other planning commission members have any questions?
Just, Paul, have you looked back at those, 30 years ago? I'm sure you probably haven't had the time or the effort to do that, but, I mean, do you agree that all that was in place then?
The plan that was last revised in 1962 shows East Phillip Drive going through, and there's a cul-de-sac. There is an extension going towards the Reeves tract that says future right-of-way or something to that extent. Nothing had been acted upon, and like Mr. Snyder had said, it was shared upon 2 lots. And East Phillip Drive, as it goes down, is a straight shot, and the bulb goes off to the side. And the way the right-of-way was laid out, the easement originally would have gone as if East Phillip Drive wasn't a cul-de-sac, it would be a straight line. The applicant for Select Sites is, because they bought one of the 2 properties, they're taking that right-of-way and it's curving into the cul-de-sac and then going through. So that's really the history of that. Obviously, I wasn't born when the plans were approved and signed by the township, but that is what the plan showed at the time.
Thank you.
I got some questions.
Go ahead.
And these aren't necessarily directed at any individual, I'm just checking for understanding, and maybe it'll help the planning commission. So, the select sites development, did that ever get recommended for approval by the planning commission to the board of supervisors?
Yes, it did.
It did?
Same night.
Same night,
Same
right?
night. Yeah,
Okay.
both plans were on the agenda.
So neither one of them got approved by the board of supervisors?
Neither was approved,
Right.
correct, by the
And so-
supervisor.
And then you flipped over to the PRD, went through that, and that never got approved.
Correct.
So select sites, so the PRD and the by right plan were both recommended by the planning commission for approval by the, I'm asking.
Yes. So the by right plan, Select Sites and the Reeves property were both recommended for approval in that December 2009.
2008, I think. Okay.
Yeah, 2008.
Okay. All right, so,
And basically, we agreed to put that on the shelf while we tried those other PRD plans.
what I'm trying to remember, Mr. Puliga, is did the planning commission ever recommend approval of the PRD plan to planning commission? There was 2 of them. Do you remember, Phil?
Well, I'm looking at the notes from that night, and it's a little confusing, but the motion was the recommendation of the Reeves plan, and below it says both plans, but the Reeves plan had submitted 2 plans at that time, the original and the alternate. And
But I think the original wasn't a part of that conversation that
I'm
night.
not certain that the Select Sites plan was approved. It may well be the language here is ambiguous. They don't go into any details we're talking about in terms of the single lot. I don't think it's mentioned.
I don't even think the Select Sites property is mentioned. The title of the discussion is the Reeves property. And it's unclear. It was my impression that the single lot was never up for review. I could be wrong, but we're talking about something that happened in 2009, and the record appears to be a little ambiguous.
We can dig back into that, but the Select Sites plan came out of a recommendation earlier in the process by the Planning Commission that a second access to East Phillip be provided. So the review by the Planning Commission clearly was with the access to East Phillip.
Right, I remember that.
As a matter of fact, I do recall on that recommendation, it was also to make the connection a private connection. So that was part, so that was part of that discussion.
Right,
It was a limited access,
right.
one way.
You have
Not at that
I have
time.
another question.
It wasn't one way, it was to make
The
it,
intent was to make sure it wasn't a throughway.
that's correct.
All right. Mr. Puliga, at the end of your introduction, you ran through something about, you talked about various options, I believe. maybe that wasn't the right word.
A couple different plans. We had there have been two PRD plans.
It was
That's-
at the very end, I think it was with reference to what's going on up here.
The
Alternate?
The alternate.
Oh, the alternate plan, yes. The plans that are submitted to the township also has an alternate plan.
Okay,
That plan, that alternate plan was, had recommended, the planning commission back before we shelved it, recommended that we go to a T intersection instead of the Y intersection, and also recommended narrower roadway widths than than the code, and especially the road coming in from Valley Forge Road into the property. There's no houses taking access. There's no reason to have a 32-foot cartway there, and to reduce the amount of impervious coverage and water runoff, they suggested a narrow cartway as well.
does this plan in front of us tonight reflect those recommendations?
They are, but the engineer, Paul, has not reviewed that alternate sheet, as I understand, as I looked at this, but that sheet is included in the plan set that you have
Right,
for this.
okay.
Yeah, just to be clear, the plan set in general, without that, the alternate sheet, is designed to provide that there be no variances and no waivers, so that it was designed to be totally compliant. The recommendation of the planning commission with respect to width of roadway, with respect to length of cul-de-sac as a result of putting in a T intersection, those would require waivers. So from our standpoint, we obviously don't want a plan that simply requests waivers. That means that you could turn us down by denying the waivers. So we have a plan that is compliant and an alternate plan that if you want to provide the waivers for those items that I just mentioned, there's a sheet in there that you can recommend approval with those waivers. There were more waivers back in 2008 with respect to that alternate plan, but a number of those issues were involved in the litigation with the township over this plan that occurred in 2009, 2010, and then resulted in a decision by Judge Nagel on some of those items that would have required waivers if you followed the township's interpretation of their ordinance. Those were disallowed by the court. The Commonwealth Court affirmed Judge Nagel's decision. So there will be places in the review of this plan where we have comments from T&M that we will respond by saying that issue no longer exists. It was decided in 2010 by Judge Nagel. For example, the issue of grading within 5 feet of the property line. And that type of thing. Those were all involved in the case. It's our intent to put that case on the final plan so that there's no issue as to what the law is with respect to that, as well as the decision of the zoning hearing board.
Can I comment?
Sure.
No question really about what Judge Nagel did in this case. What I'm struggling with is how the PRD case conclusions and decisions such as they are that deal with a separate ordinance, separate designs could possibly be binding on this application.
Simply because they relate to the same ordinance section you're trying to enforce here, and interpreted that ordinance section as to what it means and what it doesn't mean.
We'll look at it.
So the planning commission tonight is being are we being asked to make a recommendation to the board tonight with regard to what's in front of us?
No.
This is just a discussion tonight?
This is to help bring you up to date as to what's involved and to respond in part to some of those questions in the letter, which should have discussion. Actually, most of what's in that letter, we think should be in a discussion meeting with Todd, our engineer, and your engineer to go through his letter so that we're not taking a 20-some page letter and trying to go through all of those things in front of the planning
Been
commission.
through enough.
So after that, after you guys get together, you guys come to agreement on some things, then you'll be back in front of planning commission again?
And there'll probably be some items that, as a result of comments from Paul, will create some revisions. So my guess is there'll be one more set of review after we respond to this set of reviews. So whether that's a November meeting of yours, whether that's a December meeting of yours, as we've explained to Mr. Brennan, we're here to try and get this done. We're not here to try and force time periods or anything like that. We want to be reasonable and make sure that the appropriate time is spent.
You want to get approval of the plan as it is. There's the township or the planning commission asked for the alternates. Are you going to remain open to implementing those alternates on a case-by-case basis, or how are you going to take that forward?
Very simply, the alternate, there are specific items of alternate. They're designed on the sheets that are the alternate sheets to this plan. If you recommend that those waivers be granted, they would be granted to design in accordance with those sheets. So it would be, it's already there. If the Board of Supervisors then agrees to grant those waivers, the final plan will reflect those sheets. If the board doesn't grant those waivers, then we still have the sheets that are compliant sheets.
Will you do it on a case-by-case basis? Let's say we recommend 5 alternates, the board approves 4 of them.
They're really only 1 or 2.
Okay.
They're not
That's
a
helpful.
lot. It's length of cul-de-sac, it's width of road, it's, the T intersection is a function of those things.
Okay.
So basically, the plan we're looking at is the plan you're presenting. And if we agree to this plan, then you may ask us to look at the alternates, but.
We're asking him to look at the alternates.
Yeah, we did that because they were things requested by the planning commission back in 2008 that we said, if we get the waivers, we can do them.
Yeah.
But we need waivers from the township to do them, so they can only be an alternate plan because we can't give you a plan that is dependent on waivers.
To keep our life simple, we should really focus on this plan and not the alternates yet, but.
Yeah, yes, and the changes for the alternates are minimal in design. They basically resolve around the intersection into the property where you come in, after you've come in from Route 23. And they relate to the width of roads. Those are the major things that would be involved.
But at one time, you were looking for condos in the property, you were looking at that, but that's not an alternative.
We were asked by the township to put this on hold and consider that.
Yeah.
That's what happened for the last 10 years or more.
Wow.
But that's kind of off the table now?
Well, those are in court. And obviously, we're going to build whatever we get approved first.
I don't understand that.
I don't understand.
Totally. What do you mean that's in court?
We can have multiple plans that are before a municipality. We don't have to limit ourselves to one plan. We have the Sedgley Farms PRD plan that is on appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We have the Eagles Point PRD plan, which is on appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. And we have this plan, which is not on appeal to anything. So, We're trying to get any of those three approved to build. This client and this landowner started before 2006, and so we will take whatever we get first.
Mr. Polley, go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to ask, at one point, there was an amount of the property that was to be reserved for open space. Is that still part of it? And the other thing was, I was going to consult with PennDOT's Project Path to get you a free bridge at one time. Is anything of that still feasible or doable?
So at this point, your first question was, what was the first?
Open space.
Acreage for
Yes,
open space.
There is a very small requirement for open space under the R1 zoning, and we are providing that on the plan. The other PRD plans had like 30 and 40% open space. That was a different layout. That's with the PRD plans. That's
Got it.
not in front of you
Okay.
with this plan. So
But there
a
is some
small-
designation for open
Yeah,
space.
it's just a small section of open space.
Okay.
On this plan. As far as the bridge is concerned, at this point, there's not a trail on this. That bridge we were going to utilize on a trail.
Got
And
it.
it's not part of this, it's part of the PRD plans.
You said something about 56 versus 51?
Yes, our original plan was 56 lots. We went to the we've been to the Historic Commission and the Planning Commission before. One of the things we were asked to do was to add some more area to the William Reeves house. And so we took the lot line that was adjacent and swung it around so it would have a better view of the reservoir. And we also eliminated a lot that was between this and the carriage house. And previously, our stormwater management was back where this carriage house is. They asked if we could leave the carriage house, and so we have that by itself on a lot. So both the William Reeves house and the carriage home will be sold as is on two different lots. And so it's part of through the approval process. We went from 56 lots to 51 lots.
Okay, so we kind of wandered over into the other portion of the review letter. So,
We're just trying to get all the facts straight.
yeah, well, we were looking at specifically the select sites 1 acre lot on East Phillips and the shorter review letter. So I'd like to, if there are any more questions on that application from the planning commission, we can look at that. Other than that, I would like to have Paul go through and give his short.
I'm going to jump in before we go.
Yeah, I'd like to also
What I'd like
have
to
another
do
comment.
is, just before we leave select sites, I just think it would help the planning commission if we summarize the discussion, and if anybody has a timeline with regard to, maybe it's not a timeline, but the sequence of events of how it started out, because I remember, but I don't remember the details of it was going to be a private road, there was going to be closed off.
It's a limited
The planning,
access road.
the planning commission asked for it. I think it started out as fire access. Just how did that
No,
happen?
the original plan that was filed was, in essence, this plan. It was, the select sites property is not on here. It was a single access to Route 23. Recommendations, traffic-wise, from an access standpoint, recommendation because of the size of the property, was that we provide 2 means of access to this property. As a result, we looked first at the extension of the cul-de-sac without having to do anything more than use that easement, that right-of-way that was there that comes to our property, on the basis that we were a beneficiary of that, even though we weren't a lot on that subdivision plan. We decided that that was litigation that wasn't necessary, and the select sites property became available. So we acquired it and looked at the issue, as I said, of whether we provide a road within that right-of-way now that we were an owner under that subdivision plan, or whether we revise where that is so that we don't have to deal with the property owner to our north. It was to be a road. The issue of whether it was going to simply be a full-use road was an item of discussion in meetings. Certainly there were people that would like to see it restricted, would like to see if it could be private, would like to see if it could have road calming features to it. All of those things were discussed. The recommendation of the Planning Commission was that it be private and restricted in some way so that it would not be used as a cut-through. You have to remember that we have no desire to see that road used as a cut-through either. It's coming through our development as well as through East Phillip. There were all sorts of discussions of what way you could do that, but the only thing that resulted out of being in front of the Planning Commission was the recommendation you see in that, in those minutes, that it be private and restricted in some way. Right now, the application as it stands doesn't provide for restriction. We're willing to talk about that, but the issue of what it is right now it's a public road as proposed.
What's Plan B?
What?
If you didn't come off of East Phillip, what's Plan B for a second means of entrance or egress?
East Phillip. There is no Plan B.
Right.
And where does Castleberry fit into that mix? Is that?
It's not feasible. This is the feasibility. This is what we we'll have an easement to for this property through the other entity that's part of our development.
They're trying to move forward in a practical, feasible way, is my understanding of this. The only question I have is maybe to Bill Brennan or the engineer. Back when I was supervisor, we were talking about a trail that would connect ultimately through the perimeter of the Reeves property, and I don't know whether any of that is moved forward.
So Barbara, that's the PRD plan. So that's not in front of us tonight. That's the plan that's caught up in court.
Thank you.
So it's the one that has the green space, the bridge, the trail. It's got all those
Got it.
options. Yep.
Okay.
I think the trail was part of the
Practical
PRD
feasibility.
program, and not this one.
Okay.
Okay, I think, Paul, if you could point out the highlights, the sticking points in the 50-lot subdivision, 57.
Did you want public comment on this letter first?
I think since they're so linked together, that if we can hold off on the public comment till after that, because we'll be wandering into the PRD again.
Understood.
So,
Okay.
or not PRD, but into the by right plan.
All right, so again, the letter here, now we're talking about the Reeves tract, which is the larger subdivision as shown on the exhibit that the applicant has brought to the table here. My letter has a lot of comments, and I wanted to highlight a handful that I thought the Planning Commission would want to hear discussed. The first would be comment C2, which is found on pages 3 and number 4. And I know a lot of these comments that I'm going to talk about are kind of like rollovers on top of each other. So this being the first comment, so what we're talking about here is, in particular, Sedgley Lane is being it's going in between Dorchester and an area called Belmont Terrace. The length of Sedgley Lane is running along a back of 5 properties on Dorchester Lane, all of which exist. And the comment that I'm talking about right now, C2, is that the one property in the far corner, it actually has a tennis court in the back there. It's adjoining. I'll get up and point it over here to you. That when you have the double frontage, because that is presently a rear yard for that, but now it's going to become a double frontage, it doesn't meet the required length of 105 feet. So it's only 101 feet, but it causes a problem. You know, it causes a waiver that will be required for the project. It's impacting a neighboring property.
And let me address that, because that one's very easy to answer. That one was specifically answered in Judge Schnegel's decision in 2010, and these are not double frontage lots as found by the court. So that comment has been decided already. Neither the Belmont Terrace nor the Dorchester lots along any of the Sedgley Drive coming in were determined by the court to not be double frontage lots.
Can I just comment briefly?
Yeah.
Judge Nagel's opinion speaks for itself, of course, but his decision on the double frontage lots was specifically related to the fact that Belmont Terrace did not contain a roadway. And my reading of it was that his conclusion about there not being double frontage lots did not refer to Dorchester.
No, it did. And you can specifically look at it, and what it basically also said was that the area of ground that's between the right-of-way and those lots precluded those lots from being double frontage lots. And that's what's shown on this plan. And that's specifically on page 21 of Judge Nagel's opinion.
Did he say that because of the open space, it's about 12 or 15 inches wide here was a factor?
Yes.
And what if the township doesn't accept that open space?
You mean accept ownership of it?
Right.
Well, we have a homeowners association.
Now, the open space that you're referring to, it's required to be at least 1/4 acre.
It's a
inside.
reserved strip. That's
It's
what.
labeled as open space. And it's a 1/4 acre, and it's supposed to be 75 feet wide, neither of which
It's
is,
not intended as qualifying open space.
you use it in the calculations for open space.
We'll look at that, but the judge was very clear. Those lots are not reverse frontage lots. And therefore, that issue on this plan was decided.
But for that to be considered open space or not right of way abutting those lots, you'll need a waiver, because that
No,
reserve
not-
strip or an open space, it doesn't meet the criteria. It's not
No.
contiguous for a 1/4 acre, and it's not 75 feet wide.
If it were to be qualifying open space. Now, I'll look at the fact as to whether it was used in the calculation of qualifying open space. I don't think it was. But the fact that it exists doesn't mean that it has to meet the requirements of qualifying open space as long as we provide the required qualifying open space. This was all argued in 2010. I don't care, I mean, read the decision.
Yeah, when I looked over the decision, I guess I didn't read in the same detail, but I read it as it was Belmont Terrace or Belmont Place, that area.
This is not a strip along Belmont Terrace. This refers to this strip along Dorchester.
But why would the township have to accept a strip of land? I mean,
They
what-
don't
or
have
a-
to. They don't have to accept it. We've provided it. It can be owned by the homeowners association.
At 16, well, it's about 16 inches wide. I mean, it's supposed to be actively.
I don't care if it's 4 inches wide. It was on the plan, the judge looked at it, the judge determined that it prevented those lots from being reverse frontage lots. That's the issue you have as to whether they're reverse frontage lots. The court determined that those lots were not reverse frontage lots.
Okay, we'll look into it. Next comment is comment C3, which is also a, I'm sorry, did anyone have any comment on that? I apologize. Or do you want to wait till?
Before you get further into it, I just wanted to address something that was on page 2 of your letter, which you say the zoning ordinance, including amendments after 1997 to June 1, 2011. The applicability of the zoning ordinance is what existed as of May 27, 2006, and you have the June 1, 2011 in two places.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll make sure that any of the comments are applicable to the right zoning ordinances.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Going into C3, so what we're talking about there is that the proposed lot 21, which is one of the existing structures, will have an existing garage in the new front yard. And so what we're saying is that this is that's not allowable. You can't have an accessory structure in the front yard.
Yes, I can address that. That is one of the outbuildings that the Historic Commission took a look at, and they're going to go out and take it. We had a meeting the other evening. They're going to go take a look at it. As far as we're concerned, we're happy to take it down. It doesn't need to be there. If it has historical significance, I'd ask them that they propose to the supervisors a waiver to allow it to be there. So I'm fine with taking, it's just a.
Why wouldn't you like redo the plan so that there's enough land there that you can do that?
So that garage is right here.
Yeah.
We actually put, we bent the lot line so that it could have a side yard and remain. I have a picture of it right here.
Well, why not? I mean, it might mean you have less lots on the property, but if you move the road so that you allowed enough room for that garage.
The only way that garage can be in the rear of the structure that it relates to is if the road were in that spit.
No, but it could be in the front as long as there's enough frontage, right?
No, it has
You
to
can't
be in the
ever
rear yard.
you can't put the garage in the front of the property?
No, it
No.
has to be in the rear yard.
Okay,
Behind the house.
okay, sorry.
So that's a matter, I think, of the supervisors determining whether they think historically they want to keep it or not. And so I'm good either way with that.
So the next comment I'll direct you to is comment C number 12, which is on page number 6. That comment says that no fence or wall may be built within the legal right-of-way or within 5 feet of a parkway, whichever is greater. And what we're commenting on is that on Segley Lane, which is the access way from Valley Forge Road 23 up into the subdivision, has a retaining wall within the right-of-way. And we're saying that's not in compliance. On the east side of Segley Lane, it's the longer length of wall. On the western side of Segley Lane, it's a shorter length of wall. And I want to note that on the east side, it's basically pavement, curb, and then the wall. And when you think about the safety of this, you don't want to have a curb and a wall because it's going to accentuate a drop should a vehicle, person fall. On the western side, it's pavement, curb, then there's a little bit of sidewalk and grass, and then the wall, all of which is within the 50 feet right-of-way for Segley Lane.
Just a comment on that. If the planning commission and supervisors ultimately think that a narrower cartway is most, I guess, more desirable, then that wall obviously can be mitigated. So if you want the 32-foot wide, we're going to need a wall there. So
Can you build up the land and make the wall further away from the cartway? Is that impossible, or?
Well, we'll take a look at that a little bit. When we were last here, since the planning commission was looking at reducing the cartway width, we could take care of it with just grading. So if that's not, we'll have to figure out how to do that. I know it can't prevent, John, you may be able to answer this. I know it can't prevent the road from being built.
Yeah, that was part of Judge Nagel's decision as well, on the grading and walls if they're necessary to provide access to the property. So we'll look at it, but we certainly would like to hear back whether there's a recommendation to decrease the width of that, because that would make it much easier to grade. It's the fact that you've got 9 feet on each side at most to grade in.
The next comment I would like to direct your attention to is on both pages 8 and 9. It is comment D number 5, and I'll just stand up just to help guide you through what's going on here. So, what I'm going to be talking about right now
4 and
is
5, is
this
that
area
what
right
you're
here on Study Lane, and between those 2 lots on Dorchester.
Paul, I missed that.
No, that's fine. So I'll go to this side so everyone can see it. So that the next that I'm going to talk about is going to be an area right here, this common lot area between, this is Chapel View Estates. I know this is lot number 3, not lot number 4. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the UPI numbers are, but I just want to give you perspective of what this comment is going to be about. So with that, the applicant is proposing a storm sewer system that starts with a head wall, which is on the upstream side, which would be on the, I'm going to call it's the west side, which is the high side of this plan view that you're looking for. And that is, they're proposing a head wall there to collect drainage. And our first comment there on part A of that is that the head wall is going to be, it's very close to the existing property line on that Belmont Terrace, and it's also lower than the existing grade. So one of our concerns there is that between having to put in some stabilization, some riprap, it's going to encroach onto the adjoining property. Secondly, the proposed improvements there is the head wall is going to have 2 inlets on Segley Lane, and then the applicant is proposing to go into an existing storm easement that is shared between 2 properties on Chapel View Estates, UPI 27-648.3 and UPI 27-648.4. Again, I'll just call them Chapel View Estates lots 3 and 4. The applicant is looking to tie their storm sewer system directly into that area. That easement that is presently existing has a existing depression, a 42-inch head wall, and the pipe that goes into the storm sewer system of Chapel View Estates. The reason why this comment is brought up is that they are connecting into this easement, and this easement is for the community, Chapel View Estates, lots 3 and 4. The Reeves property was not named as a beneficiary of this easement, and therefore have no right to just necessarily tie into it.
Wouldn't it make sense to do that, though?
It's not their easement to tie into. It's the pipe and head wall is it's not owned by the homeowners association. It's shared between lots 3 and number 4 at Chapel View Estates.
So would they have to get approval from those 2 residents?
Yes.
To do that?
Yes, because they are not.
Have they gotten that?
This is the low area where all of the area above it drains to and goes down. The water from west of our panhandle, that water flows down, collects through there and comes down. That's why the development below us has an inlet there, because the water from above and off that property is flowing there. All we're doing is providing that flow in the same place. So we have a riparian easement to allow our water to go there. Most of it's not our water, most of it's coming from off-site. And secondly, as Ms. Cohen said, we thought it was better to connect them instead of let it flow out from our property overland for a few feet down and collect in another head wall.
Right.
So we thought it was an appropriate way to handle it. And we do have a right to have our water flow there. So,
It sounds like you're being considerate of
So-
nature and what it's doing.
So I understand. I don't believe that the easement, which goes all the way up to the property line, isn't intended to be an easement to protect that the water coming through there has a right to go. But that's our response to the comment. The other issues that are in there, A through D, probably don't need to go through with all of us tonight. We can have Jeremy go through them with Paul as we look at the design of that.
John, could you just explain for the public what the riparian easement is that you mentioned and what it means?
What it means is there's a channel or flow of, there's a low point, a low swale of the property that collects water from above. And the people whose water it is that comes down there have a continuing right in law to allow their water to go there. That's what's known as a riparian
There's
easement.
no document, there's no written easement, this is a common law easement you're talking about, right?
I haven't researched it because I just saw this today. I know that that's where the water comes from. If you have documentation you want us to look at as to whether it's a specific easement or a common law easement, that's fine. But from our standpoint, either way, all we're doing is keeping the water going where it comes now.
As I recall, that was the recommendation of the previous engineer as to how to tie that in, the previous township engineer.
Just going along with this, again, that land is owned by
Two
lots
properties.
3 and lots 4.
Right.
And it's clearly stated that on the Chapel View Estates, and that's why I want to bring it to the attention that going on to that easement, the applicant is not a beneficiary of that easement. It would have to be
No, but it
granted
is,
access.
but it's still a public safety kind of thing, a riparian buffer, and what they're planning to do is practical and
If our water goes
appropriate.
there now, we don't need an easement for where our water naturally goes. So I disagree with you that we would need to somehow obtain an easement from those two landowners. They're burdened by the fact that the water goes there.
But you're tying into, you're saying I have the benefit to go into an existing easement that is owned by two other parties.
If you wish us to stop, to end up with our discharge being at our property line and have it go over ground for 50 feet until it gets to that inlet for their pipe, fine, we'll do that.
Yeah, but that's not good practice, right?
The prior township engineer recommended that we do this.
Yeah, and have you talked to those neighbors to get their permission?
As I said, we don't need the permission to do that.
Excuse me, well, one of the reasons it was raised is because the township has been the recipient of a number of complaints about water flooding onto those properties. Now, we don't know whose water it is or where it came from, but it's a concern to some of the neighbors, and it should be addressed.
And I would also like to add that in comment number D, where we're talking about the improvements here, the existing end wall, that's a 42-inch, compared to the new inlet that's going to be put into the easement as proposed by the applicant. It's almost about 5 feet higher. And as we were looking at that and the drainage on the adjoining properties, we noted that lots 2 through 4 would all be impacted significantly by, you know, raising that area by 5 feet and some flooding, as well as lot number 1, which is the closest one to Valley Forge. So we had concerns with that. I know that they're talking about changing what they're going to propose, but I did want to make sure that you were aware that in the event that this would go forth, it wouldn't be just restricted to the area of that easement. It would chase on to these adjoining property owners to do the proper grading that would need to get the water to
So
where
the
it is.
wastewater management scheme is not ideal, is where we stand from where it's designed.
I'm sorry, sir.
It's not ideal the way it's being proposed, based on where you are. If it's gonna run
What-
and improve, and impact existing properties with additional water, then that's not the right solution, right?
I don't want to say it's additional water. I want to say that by raising it up, right now it's a big like depression. And they're proposing to run a pipe, to put an inlet, which is going to raise everything about 5 feet. The backyards here also have to provide the proper drainage. And as we were looking at it, there was no proposed design shown there. We have concerns that a group of lots, existing lots, will be negatively impacted by this outside of this easement.
Okay.
So,
And our understanding of the situation right now, because if you remember, all we have there is a gravel driveway, which is at grade, and it's not generating the water that's getting to those backyards. Our intent is to try and design it to control that water, because we're putting in collection methods to try and prevent.
You're also putting in asphalt, right?
Yeah.
So you're taking pervious grading and make it impervious. So you gotta control that water. Is that?
Yeah, so.
I'm not missing that, right?
No, so a couple things, we're gonna try to reduce the flow that's going there right now, pre to post. We're gonna use, hopefully curbs, and curbs will direct the water that may be going where it's not supposed to, or going on the other properties right now. And, you know, I agree, we need to get the right solution to this. This was, again, you know, from the previous engineer's idea how to connect it. We could look at it.
In its own way, it makes sense to do so, as you've suggested.
Well, yeah, it's obviously something has to be done, but we also have to make sure that we're protecting the people's interests that we're representing, that their yards aren't, and basements aren't gonna be flooding because we're changing the grading.
No, but if it's a broader effort involving the property owners, they could see improvements to the water flow based on the new development coming through and making improvements to the way the drainage is
Well, I think
happening.
that point needs to be proven.
I agree.
I agree. We'll take a look at it and try to do its best.
And as we suggested, that would certainly be a discussion in a meeting of engineers and Todd to try and do something that is consistent with what the township thinks is the best solution and what we can achieve.
Thank you.
all right, so the next comment I'd like to direct your attention to is D8, which is shared on pages 9 and 10 of the letter. And what that comment is talking about is the infiltration testing that was completed for the projects. The development has several different areas designated as stormwater management areas, and these areas are all underground facilities, and for lack of a better description, they're utilizing a milk crate system, which is a very strong plastic boxes where stormwater drainage comes into and it collects into these milk crates, and the water rises up and infiltrates out or is outlet accordingly. And like I said, these are all underground facilities, and in going through the report, the stormwater management report that was concluded, we had some concerns about the infiltration testing results that were provided. There were, from what we understand, there were about 34 test pits that were dug, and there were a total of 12 percolation tests that were completed. And that is not always a negative. When someone goes out there and they dig a test pit, the geologist will quickly be able to discern if this is a place where we want to do a percolation test or not, depending on soil stratum and things like that. But what I do want to note is that in a couple particular areas, like let's say stormwater management F, they had 2 test pits there, test pit 5 and test pit 6. Test pit 5 had an infiltration rate of 7.5 inches. Test pit 6 had an infiltration of 1/2 inch. And the analysis used 7 inches. So it was a very aggressive infiltration rate to assume on just 2 test pits. Additionally, there was no factor of safety involved. Usually when you do these infiltration tests, you do a factor of safety, which is almost like you cut it in half. So if it has an infiltration rate of 5, you say it's 2.5, just to make sure that if there's a failure or an anomaly in the soil stratum, that there's not a problem. Also in stormwater management area B, they are utilizing the test pits 29 and 30. There was no percolation tests available for those. So we have no idea how to justify that. And then stormwater management A had a test pit in there which was number 27, and they also use test pit 28, which is about 100 feet away from the stormwater management area. So what we're commenting there is that we have concerns about the infiltration rates that are being shown on the stormwater management plan. We would like a geologist to go out there to either redo these tests, let us know what kind of percolation tests are being completed out there, double ring infiltrometer. Additionally, these tests are old, so these tests should be revisited at this point. I should note.
Tests are old. How old are we talking?
I believe these were from 2008, Jeremy.
2008 would be the originals, there were some subsequent tests for the PRD plan, but the ones from 2008 are definitely old. So, and with the revisions to the design, we've already discussed the need to do additional testing.
All right, thank you. And the other thing too I would like to note as well is that as the township is going through this review, and we're going with the SALDO, the subdivision land development ordinance, and the zoning ordinances that were current with the original application. The Chester County Conservation District, the DEP, PennDOT, et cetera, they are not beholden to the original application date. So when the applicant is looking to get the approvals from these agencies, they will be looking at it at a different stratum, and I fully would anticipate that the Conservation District and the DEP, if it gets to that level, would want to take a look at new infiltration rates and would, challenge the applicant to provide some.
Well, I guess
new
I would agree with the percolation tests being redone if they're that old. I mean, I'm working on a job in the city of Philadelphia, 7 months. I had to go back and do them this week. So something that's from 2008 seems to me to be way too old to hold the data on that.
But just to give you perspective as well, we're doing our preliminary plan consistent with the ordinance sections. But as Ms. Cohen knows, because we've had this discussion since the start of this, Mr. English too, I guess, the Aqua doesn't like infiltration along its reservoir. It wants that water to get to the reservoir as quickly as possible. So once we have a design that meets your ordinance, at final plan, we'll be back with Aqua to talk about what adjustments they might want the township to make so that the water gets there quickly. Yeah.
I'll just add to that a little bit. One of the things that we could potentially do here is I guess, a better stormwater management system because of 2 reasons. One is when Aqua showed us the hydrographs for any storm that's going to be upstream here, the idea of us detaining water and adding it to the flow when it comes down is kind of a negative. So in high water time, on high flow times through the reservoir, they would like our water to come out and get over the dam rather than wait for delay it. The second thing is, as you may know, in low water times, they're actually pumping out of the Schuylkill River to keep the reservoir up, so they could use our water in low times. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned, but is part of this discussion that we're talking about right now, is the idea of recharge. And certainly the idea of recharge is overall a really good one, because we're replenishing the groundwater table. And that's the idea. We put impervious coverage on the surface, how we get what water used to drain in there to go. Turns out on this particular property, because of the reservoir, we're really supercharging the groundwater table. It's kind of, the reservoir is kind of supercharging underneath our property what was the groundwater level from the streams that were there. So those two things, Aqua says, can you give us better stormwater quality, spend money that you would do there, and give us better stormwater quality? So there's some things we can do there. Again, we need to get approval of where we're going, and then I think it makes sense for us to take some time and see if we can get a better stormwater management system, just because of the location of this property on the reservoir.
Thank you. It makes sense to talk to Aqua and to formulate a collaborative approach that benefits everyone.
Yeah,
Because
it's-
Route 23 got flooded last year, if you recall, with the storm. So how you manage water makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what we need to do first, though, is show that we could do the stormwater management in compliance with your ordinance, so that it's not a question of us coming in to ask to do something substandard. Once we get a preliminary plan with compliance, we can then talk about at final plan what we might do to achieve a better situation.
Yeah, and it's a little surprising, but we can, cross that bridge when we need to, but
Good point.
that Aqua would not want all that lawn fertilizer getting into the reservoir that quickly, rather
Exactly.
than infiltrating, but.
That's what they're talking about. Can we
It's
do
quality.
something, put regulations in our development? And this was easy to do with the PRD plans, because we had open space and we had a homeowners association, whereby we wouldn't put those that kind of stuff on the grass, those chemicals on the grass that would go right into water. So that's what they would like us to try to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
They would rather us try to make restrictions for that.
Not a surprise.
All right. The next comment I'd like to talk about would be comment E15, which is on page 16. Again, this is talking about East Phillip Drive, and I know we spoke about it earlier, our feelings about it being a secondary feeder and needing a 38 and 60-foot carway. I don't need to fully revisit that, since we already had the discussion, and we'll look at the decisions. But again, it was our opinion that it's a secondary feeder.
Which section were you, I missed the?
It's, I'm sorry, it's comment E, or it's comment E15 pages.
I was still in the.
Sorry about that, sir.
So is it number 15? Is that what you're talking about?
15, E15, it's on page number 16.
Yeah, I'm
So,
on page 16,
The one at the top.
It's number 15.
at the top. That's what I thought.
So again, I don't mean to belabor, but again, it was one of the bigger comments in my opinion. Going into the next comment would be E21, which is, again, I apologize, it's shared on pages 17 and 18. And I would like to, I'll just get up and kind of just show you what I'm talking about over here in this section.
What was the other number?
So as I'm describing this, I'm talking about East Phillip Drive,
Oh, okay.
the cul-de-sac, and then the East Phillip Drive connection coming into Eagles Point right here. So the way I'm drawing my pen down here is what I'm going to try to explain to everyone. Excuse me. So our concern here is that with the select sites and the cul-de-sac bulb turning there. If you are a car driving on East Phillip Drive and you're heading in towards to the Reeves tract, now I need you to just imagine this. You have your car, you're driving along straight. You have to bank your car to the right to go into the cul-de-sac bulb because the connection to East Phillip is offset. You can see how it has that little turn there. So you're driving straight on East Phillip, you bank your car to your right, you gotta then bank it to the left, you probably have a little bit of a tangent, and then you gotta bank it to the right again. And then if you're making the left-hand turn you gotta turn that way. The whole configuration of this is in simple terms, it's called horizontal curves. And it's a reverse curve if you don't have a proper amount of tangent. And what I'm trying to explain is that when you're driving a car and you turn the wheel, roads are designed so that the driver will then straighten out the wheel and be able to go this way again. Having a motion where you're doing like this is not optimal. Now this is a residential street, but again, there are requirements for tangencies and reverse curves. And the plans themselves didn't show anything there, but when you look at it, you can recognize the fact that there could be a situation where the existing bulb doesn't have the issue, but the through traffic that would be going to the Reeves tract has this turning motion that we're concerned with. So what we're asking the applicant is to take a look at this situation, look at the radius that are provided, and make sure that the proper tangents and reverse curves are eliminated.
Including
if I could
the
address that.
50 FedEx trucks that aren't like, you know, that are boxy and pretty big. That's
Yeah,
why they're gonna go in.
anything. Trash truck.
Yeah.
Anything.
So to answer that question, the East Phillip Drive, the two-set plan, the geometry is actually on that cul-de-sac because it's a 50 scale blow up. We do show that we comply with the 150-foot centerline radius, 100-foot tangent in between curves. And then we intersect with Sedgley, our proposed development at, it's radial because you're on a radial turn there. So we're coming off of that at a 90-degree intersection. Even though it's a radial connection,
So-
it's still coming in at more than 60-degree minimum, which you referenced in your review letter.
All right, so you're saying that, so from understanding what you just said, there is the proper tangencies, there's no reverse curves, and the proper tangent lengths are provided for that entire run.
That's correct. And
Okay, we'll
like I
look
said,
into that.
If you look at the two-sheet plan for Eastville Drive, all the geometry's on that block because the cul-de-sac is there.
Okay.
I'll add one comment. A lot of projects I've been involved with, when they have a cul-de-sac that's this large, with that amount of paving in there, we've done center planted islands. This would be potentially a really good place for one of those. It helps A, slow traffic, and B, gets everybody going around a turn and then entering the drive. I just throw it out as an idea, but we've used that concept on other projects.
I like that idea.
All right, so then going into comment E24, again, which is on page 18 and 19, again, we're talking about the classification of the road of both East Phillip and Sedgley Lane. We have our opinions that we feel as if that's a secondary collector, and we'll have to look at the legal decision and determine if it is applicable to that situation. Next comment that I had noted was comment E29, which is on page number 20. So what we're talking about there is that the sidewalks to be provided along all streets. And presently, the applicant is not showing any sidewalks along the portion of Eagles Point Road where the arch culvert is going to be located, so that there's a break in the connectivity of that area. And we're questioning if they're going to propose that. And secondly, we wanted to see the sidewalk on both sides of the roads throughout the community. We're going to recommend that for this community. Again, the Board of Supervisors can determine what they like, but it was our opinion that it should be added. So I don't know if you want to address why there's no sidewalk on the...
Sure. Yep, happy to. Number one is we did discuss with the planning commission where the sidewalks would be, and they were comfortable with sidewalks on one side. That's why we're showing them there. That was a direct discussion with the previous planning commission. The other thing is that we were going to have this emergency access, and we were actually bringing the sidewalk to that and having that be part of the connection so that they're not, so walking is not happening over the bridge. So that's in particular why we did that.
But that's only 12 feet wide, and that's to be used by traffic if need be, and it's not ADA compliant. It doesn't have the proper slope. So there is a disconnect of the sidewalk and the ADA compliance with this.
Yeah.
It goes over 4%, cross slope over there.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
So I
just
don't-
saying, like,
Yeah, we could take a look at that. The idea was to keep the people off the bridge and have them walk around the side.
I understand, and I mean, I don't know if I feel comfortable saying that people are gonna use an emergency access way as the sidewalk. It's
Well,
about,
the sidewalk feeds into it and then comes out of it. So if you're walking on the paved area the concrete area that you're supposed to be on, it takes you to that and then drops you off. So I don't think there'll be an issue of visual misunderstanding. The question of whether we meet ADA is an issue that we'll have to take a look at, because we obviously would have to.
but also we have to deal with the fact that it's the emergency access. So in the event that there's an emergency and the road can't be used, somebody who has to use this is sharing it with two-way vehicular traffic with no sidewalk.
And if there's an emergency and that's being used, then if the sidewalk went over the bridge, that's where the emergency would be, and they wouldn't be walking there anyway. So I discount that concern of it, but we will certainly look at the ADA issue of it.
Okay.
Can I comment just briefly? Sure. Are you planning,
Is there a plan for an emergency access? It's not shown as an emergency access on this plan. Is this, what's the story with the emergency access?
Answer my question as to whether you're talking about it as, quote, an official emergency access or as a facility that can be used in the case of an emergency. That's what this is. Because there is no way to have emergency access to the south on this property because of it's an official one, because of the separation requirement between the existing access and the emergency access. You can't, there's no way unless you build a second bridge across property owned by Aqua to have a second access to that south. There's the existing driveway, which has simply recently been repaired and paved. And that will be connected to the road system, so that if there's a reason that the culvert crossing is blocked and can't be used, a vehicle, whether it's an emergency vehicle, whether it's somebody needing to exit from the back, will be able to use that driveway to get out of there. That's what is intended by the continued existence of that driveway crossing at the current culvert. It's not an official emergency access. I'd hate to label it as that and then get into an issue of whether it's non-compliant, because it's not intended to be. There's not a requirement that there be one in any ordinance or in the fire code, but we're providing that anyway since it's there as a tied-in feature to our street, so that if it serves somebody and benefits somebody, they can use it in a situation where they can't use the regular road.
So basically, the south side of the property has only one means of access, and the north side, which is less houses, will have two.
Once you travel over to the north side, you've got to.
Yeah. Kind of, yeah, it's interesting geometry there.
Yeah, we've done a study of other developments in your township, and there are a number of them, including right across the reservoir from this. There are two where there's one road into the development and a long loop, and that's the only way in. So it's not unusual for this size on the south side to have one means of access. What we've done is taken the precaution that since that one means of access goes over a culvert, which some of the others do, maybe not as deep a ravine that the culvert's in, that we at least have a bypass around that could be used if needed.
All right, I guess the next comment I would talk about, his comment, excuse me, E33, which is found on page 21. Again, this is going back to the consideration of the lots on Dorchester Lane now becoming a double frontage lots. I just want to, I know we've had a discussion on that, but I do want to just note that a concern with this would be that with a double frontage lot, there would be the creation of existing nonconformities, which would be any sheds, tennis courts, pools in the backyard, as well as if any of these applicants in the future would want to put in a pool, a shed, or something, that would be in their front yard, so they would have to seek zoning relief in that situation. I
What
know
number and
the
what
applicants-
page?
I'm
I
sorry?
lost track of where you were. What number, what page?
E33, page 21.
Okay, so I am on the right page. Thank you.
Sure.
And by the way, there was just one other part of that discussion in Judge Nagel's opinion, and that is that the prohibition was against creating double frontage lots, which was interpreted to mean within your subdivision, not creating somebody else's lot from an existing subdivision is now a double frontage lot. But that was also part of his discussion.
I'm surprised there's ambiguity about that. That must be something that's dealt with a lot. And,
Yeah, well, you had two sections that, the question was, do you read them together, do you read them apart, what do they mean? And it was an interesting discussion in the opinion.
so Paul, you'll check that out and give us a,
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
gonna look into that,
Yeah.
figure out, try to understand what Judge Nagel said. Whatever he said is controlling, and sometimes there's disagreement over the details of what it would be.
I'm an engineer, not a lawyer.
okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. Next comment to talk about would be, again, E38, which is on page 22. And we have talked about this, and again, this is talking about the open space should be reasonably located to serve all the residents, et cetera. I do want to note that in my comments here, in both comment A and comment B, I used the square footage based off the 2008 plan. So where it says 834 square feet for open space 2, it should be 1,151. That was an error I made. I was looking at between both plans. And on comment B, it says 20,460 square feet. That should actually read 20,519 square feet. So there is modest increase on each of these. Again, I defer to these as being, they are less than a quarter acre and less than 75 feet wide. They aren't usable active recreation areas for this. I know we've already spoken about that. But that was my concerns with E38.
And just to comment on that, I believe we'll be able to get that requirement without the other spaces. We should be able to handle that.
There's the open space that's really intended to be provided for use by the residents is down in the bottom corner where you see the green, where there's view of the reservoir, an area that has view of the eagles across the way and so forth. That was what was intended to be the compliant open space. The fact that the others are labeled open space, maybe they should be labeled HOA property. We don't we don't care. But the compliant requirement, we believe we meet in the green area.
That makes sense, because I remember our Environmental Advisory Council had a discussion, one of the former supervisors, Jim Morrison, actually counted eagles on the property, and would be nice if this open area corresponds to where the eagles have the most activity. It's just past tense coming into the present tense.
Continuing on.
They don't need ground, they fly high.
Continuing on to comment E44, which is on page 24. This is in relation to the stormwater management for the site. And the way that the site stormwater management was analyzed is that they looked at it as drainage areas south and north. South being the portion basically over to the left of the exhibit you see in front of you, north being to the right, the smaller, slender portion. What we're talking about there is that for the drainage areas for the south side, again, which is the bigger side, the post-development rates exceed what's allowable for the 25, 50, and the 100-year storm events. They have, the applicant has looked at this as both drainage areas in unison with each other, but the stormwater management practice is that I'm looking at these individually. And in going a little bit further down into comment 45, which is on page 24 as well, I note that I feel as if there should be additional drainage points to be analyzed pre and post developed. They are looking at two specific ones, almost showing where you can see where those arrows are on the bottom areas, the water strip. They're calling the water drainage areas here and here, where we feel as if there's a drainage shed here, there's one here, there's one over here, there's one over here, and that's what we're saying, that they are looking at it as a whole, but you have to look at each individual drainage shed and apply the pre and post reductions accordingly. So those were the comments, basically 44 and 45. 44 is what I'm saying is that 3 of the storm events are greater than what they should be, and 45, I'm saying there should be multiple points of interest of the stormwater management being reviewed. Any questions? I'll proceed forward.
That's an engineering.
Okay.
Ultimately, it all gets to the reservoir. That's the point.
No, I understand, Mr. Pollack. I was just saying that according to, I'm going with the ordinance, and the ordinance says that, shall be released to the nearest waterway or downstream property in the manner of the pre-development conditions. So that's why it's bisected.
It's in the manner of the pre-development conditions. It is, just like I just read that page, because there's no comma in that sentence, so that if it's released to the nearest waterway, it's not in a manner similar to pre-development conditions. If it's on downslope property, it has to be in a manner. You would need a comma if it was to apply to both.
I'm sorry, I misunderstand.
When you talk to Jeremy and Todd, they can go over that with you.
Okay. Next comment is 55, or excuse me, is E55, which can be found on sheets 27 and 28. Now, the comments on this is speaking about that in some locations we feel as if there is encroachment of disturbance that would go on to neighboring properties. In particular, the grading on the Segley Lane and Eagles Point Valley Forge Road We feel that the top and the bottom wall elevations, they're not labeled, so we really don't have an idea if it's going to drift on or off there. So we're asking that the applicant provide top of wall, bottom wall elevations to make sure that there is no grading going on to adjoining properties. The second part, again, we're on page 28, this is B. This is talking about the invert grade of the H4 head wall, which is located over here on the high side of Segley Lane. That is a couple feet below what is existing grade, and the concern is that there will be grading that's going to chase onto property that does not belong to the applicant. The third point is C, which is the cul-de-sac at the end of Eagles Point South, and it's going into a proposed existing residential driveway. What we're talking about is this parcel right here. This property owner is essentially landlocked. They utilize the existing driveway for Reeves Tract for the access. The applicant is proposing to put in a new driveway off of the cul-de-sac, which will go onto their property. But again, it is grading that is onto an adjacent property not owned by the applicant. And finally, a portion of proposed lot 39 against the adjoining property line. We feel as if there could be grading going onto that property. We just are looking for a little bit more detail that the applicant can provide us. So that is, the applicant obviously cannot grade onto adjoining properties. So that's why we were commenting on that.
Yeah, so that property there, that's not on the.
Just so I'm clear, if you're talking this one, sir?
Yeah,
Yes.
and so they currently have a right-of-way to use the Reeves property to get there, to get on and off their property?
Yeah, I can answer that. I'm familiar with that. The Makala 5-acre out parcel has an easement over the Reeves property to utilize the stone driveway. So their access in and out of that property right now actually takes the existing driveway location. You can see it come here,
Yeah.
comes across here, and goes out. They also have the obligation to pay for a third of the maintenance of that. I think the son-in-law from previous Reeves that's where that property came from, and so it was a family situation. But at one time it was a 50-50 split of the shared, and now that was redone. It's a third.
And will they be granted access then to the roads as part of the Eagle Point development?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is replace their easement with direct access to a public road. So that was the idea of ending the cul-de-sac and giving them 105-foot frontage at that location. If you look at the right of way, we're providing 105 foot so that it has frontage on a public road. And they'd be responsible, by the way, for the connection to their driveway. We're also providing the ability to tie into our sewer and get public water. So we're trying to bring them up to speed.
But we're not changing their property lines at all?
Not touching their property lines.
Right.
All right, the next comment I'll direct your attention to is F1, which is on page number 30. This is under the general comments, and this is talking about the PennDOT permits that will be required, in particular to Valley Forge Road and Segley Lane. The first comment, 1A, it talks about the existing site distance. It's shown on the plans as being 550 feet on either side of Segley Lane. And although this is a PennDOT road and we'll defer to it, we wanted to note that there was no vertical profile shown. So when you have a site distance, you take a look at where the eyes of the driver would be, and you strike a profile of the two views, and there was none provided to verify that there was no obstructions or the adequate 550 foot sight distance has been provided. PennDOT will certainly be looking for that, but we wanted to make note of it that that was not provided at this time. Comment 1B is talking about the opposing left turn movements that would be occurring at the intersection of both Dorchester Way and Moorhead Road, and then Segley Lane Segley Lane and Valley Forge Road. And what I'm trying to explain there is that I'm just going to use the suicide lane. You have people that are going to be coming up and they're going to try to be making a left-hand turn into Segley Lane, and you're going to have people trying to use the same exact access way to make a left-hand turn into Moore Hall Road. The length of that is about 215 feet, and the posted speed limit is 45 miles per hour. So the concern that I'm listing there is that you're going to have opposing traffic trying to utilize the same lane in a distance of 250 feet, traveling at a speed limit of 45 miles per hour, both making left-hand turns. So, like, again, I call it the suicide lane, but you know, it's a situation that I don't think is safe for the township residents.
But will PennDOT kind of rule on that, or?
PennDOT will certainly have.
So you're highlighting it, but it's PennDOT is really the ruling authority there?
PennDOT is the ruling authority over this, but I want to make sure that the township, planning commission, the board of supervisors are aware of the situation that, is ideal for being safe.
Yeah, but let me just interject one thing. Back at the time that this plan was being considered and before the passage of the PRD ordinance in its place, PennDOT issued the highway occupancy permit for this intersection. So we know what's needed. It's already issued that permit. That permit is lapsed, so it has to be issued again. But the issues were reviewed by PennDOT at the time of issuing that permit, and so we would expect that it would be reissued. But if there's something additional we have to do, that's what we have to do to get our PennDOT permit. So we understand that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Obviously, the traffic is one of the major comments or concerns, if not the greatest. And we understand the role that PennDOT has to play in this in terms of reissuing or, doing whatever they have to do to deal with another permit application. But the subdivision, the Saldo, requires a traffic study. And the concern I have is how can the supervisors, effectively make a decision on the plan without themselves having a good feel for what's going to happen here, at that intersection. The way it's shaping up, I'm hoping that the board, my understanding was that you're proposing that the decision, be pushed back to final plan. At that point, the township would really have no ability to comment on the traffic situation.
This letter has various traffic comments in it. We don't know who your current traffic engineer is. We were referring your comments to our traffic engineer, so we will have responses. All I was saying and intending to say was that with respect to the issues that PennDOT may need to consider in issuing a permit, it's already done that. So while there are requirements in your ordinance that we'll have to meet and that we'll look at the issues that are raised in this letter and have our traffic engineer respond to them, all I was saying was from the standpoint of being able to permit that intersection, it's already been done. It just simply lapsed because of time, not because of anything that was a problem with it.
And just one last comment, we are getting new traffic counts, so they'll be plugged into the new study as well.
The next comment would be, again, F1, and this is comment number C, again, talking about the same intersection. And here we're talking about the deceleration lane and the acceleration lane approaching and leaving Segley Lane. Our concern with the deceleration lane is that it's only about 105 feet wide, and it's not very wide, or excuse me, 105 feet long, and it's not very wide. So you're going to have cars going at 45 miles per hour, going off to the shoulder and then into Segley Lane. So we had a concern with, the speed and the lack of length for the deceleration lane. Additionally, the acceleration lane, which would be leaving Segley Lane and turning right on Valley Forge Road, basically is coincidental with the deceleration lane of the Chapel View Estates, entering on Dorchester. So what our concern there is that you're going to have Segley Lane people turning right, and you're going to have people along Valley Forge Road merging into the same lane. Again, 45 miles per hour car, and then the car is trying to accelerate. It just doesn't seem like a very safe situation in this, two cars trying to use the same area, trying to do two different things.
Paul, these comments you're making about the traffic, the township asked you to evaluate this plan for the traffic out on Valley Forge Road?
Yeah, well, these are general comments. These are comments.
This is just your opinion?
These are comments that are based off of looking at these plans, and I want to present them to the board and to the planning commission. I want you to be aware of this. I don't know if you would be in audience
You're
of
making
anything.
comments about some things being unsafe, and I want to be careful before. I mean, they're very vague comments based on your opinion. I'm just questioning why they're in the letter.
I'm as a township engineer, I'm tasked with public safety and welfare. I see a situation that I feel is unsafe. I'm going to put it into a letter. As you can see, I'm not referencing an ordinance. These are general comments.
Okay.
And that's how I wanted it to be addressed. I wanted to make sure that the commissions and the supervisors would be aware of my concerns of this application.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that was it for the comments that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if the planning commission or the applicant has any that they would like to particularly discuss, but
Paul, just a quick question. Would there need to be a suicide lane on White Horse Road where Phillips comes in? Because there'll be all kinds of new traffic there that never existed before.
the challenge with South White Horse is that it's small. It doesn't have the width or the right of way to do this. So I don't know if the traffic study would merit a suicide lane or turn lanes, but it's definitely the way that East Phillip Drive is connected to South White Horse is, if you're familiar with it, there's a little bit of a dog leg going to West Phillip Drive, which is a concern because you kind of have an offset type of intersection. Additionally, as we were talking about the through traffic of people, motorists trying to avoid the intersection of Valley Forge Road and White Horse Road. They can take Segley Farm, they can take Eagles Point, they can take East Phillip, they can then take West Phillip, they can take Pennypacker, all these residential roads in this area can become inundated by just another extension. I know, based off of a previous application, people were concerned about the cut-through on the other side of the project, but now we're adding a cut-through on this side, so you're going to have a full ability to completely bypass this intersection, and that's a concern.
So will that be included in the traffic work that you guys?
Yeah, I know that was addressed previously, and I think the result of what we can do here is people will find it will not benefit them to cut through in terms of the T intersection was one of those ideas. Instead of a swoop intersection, they did timing on it. So the idea is to make sure that this does not become a cut through. There's enough traffic with just the residents, and the whole idea is to prevent the cut through. And that's the idea of that potentially private as well. Having a private connection is to guarantee that, that we stop the cut through traffic. There's no guarantees, I'm sorry.
And on the other side of the road in the other development, if you want to avoid the light at Whitehorse and Route 23, there are stop signs through the development, and you have to go slowly. So there are other things that can be done to keep the traffic flowing at a slow pace through the development.
Again, that was the idea of a stop sign at the T intersection.
I have one last comment, if
Okay.
I can ask. What is the plan for the former Reeves family residence? Is there a plan, like a place for homeowners to meet? I say this because I know Sam Reeves. He's a descendant of the family, lives in Paoli, and our museum, of which I'm president, received a portrait. I have some other materials about Samuel Reeves, David Reeves, and others, so that there are connections with the Schuylkill River Heritage Center, of which I'm president, and also the Phoenixville Historical Society, where people who moved to this development could understand the history of the property and the people who once lived there.
Yeah, so the plan right now, I know with the PRD iterations, we were asking for an additional use for that property, could become a clubhouse, for instance. With these single family, there's not the need for that. So the plan right now would just be a resale of the property.
Resale of the home, you mean?
Resale, yep. So it would not be a clubhouse in this plan.
Yeah, I thought I remembered that it was something that was considered at that time. Okay.
Okay. We have some time here before what I had called as the hard stop. If the members of the public would like to come up to the microphone, state your name and your address, and we can address your thoughts, listen to your thoughts.
Hi, my name is Al Giovanella, and I've lived here for 40 years, actually, on the other side of White Horse Road there. And you're right, 2008 was before the current climate change situation, and so that water I'm sure needs to be evaluated. It has a gradient that comes from up near Main Street, and it flows all the way down, and it flows down with a lot of force. And when a lot of people got water last year, remember that 5-inch rain? And I had a guy from PennDOT came down and talked with me, and he said, Al, he says, there's nothing I can do to help you. He says, you and all the people on the other side of White Horse Road here, you're living on a floodplain. He says, so you know that. And all I ask for you to do is when you begin changing water around or whatever, make sure, like you said, it hits the reservoir. Try not to block it up, because everybody here is going to have water in their houses if you try and shut it off and go another way. Make sure that people have the water flow to go to allow the water to flow as fast as possible, because it's starting way up on the other sort of White Horse Road, and it's crumbled bridges and stuff. And the person from PennDOT, he says, I can't do anything about it. It's a floodplain. So anyway, and if you've ever stood on that evening in particular, but if you've ever stood in that area and watched the water come down, it's you can say, well, I'm going to fix this, and but nobody's going to get in front of that water. That water's not. You have to get it through as fast as possible, or it's going to flood everyone out. The other thing, real fast, is about the traffic, and I've lived here like I say, from 1980, when it was before a lot of the houses were built, and I know that. And you talked about White Horse Road. And that's kind of gotten out of hand, and I'm afraid somebody's going to lose a kid one of these days. But it's you're not since they opened up the new entrance on the turnpike out there. Big rigs use White Horse and all, and you're not going to tell people how to drive their car. I mean, you can put lights, you can put this, you can put, when I first moved in, and this was back in 1980, I had a driveway that went from Pickering and a driveway that went on to Whitehorse. I had to shut the driveway off from Whitehorse and fix my lawn in there, because people wouldn't go 15 more feet and turn the corner. They'd cut across my land
Wow.
at 40 miles an hour, and I had 2 little kids at the time. They wouldn't go a little bit further. So you're not going to tell people on Whitehorse how to drive their car. And, you know, it's just beware that you're dealing with two, PennDOT believes that climate change is real, and so you're dealing with lots of forces of water. But, you know, it came over top of Route 23 last year and shut that off. But the other thing, this new generation of driver is something. Whitehorse is really, really nasty coming out there. And so I just want you to take some of these changes like climate change, and that's the most important one for me, because my wife was crying because our whole lot was under this much water, and it was just like a river. And so you have to let it drain, keep draining through as quickly as possible. And that's the main one for me. The other thing is the traffic situations. I know the people that have kids are concerned that there's bus stops all the way along Whitehorse Road. But I just get worried because I've noticed in places like you said about Philadelphia, along the Schuylkill River, they're building in Manayunk on a plane that was already pushed out with a flood. They're building there again. So just, we got nobody to stand up for us. So just try and, use your consideration, and all these things have people with loved ones and pets and stuff, and that's all. I can tell that you've looked at some of the force of the water, because it's awesome. It's the most, and it's only going to get worse if climate change is real, and it seems like it is. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Frank Mercurio on Spruce Grove Lane. Just as an afterthought, I live close to where Al is, and I can testify the water situation there. It was pretty nasty. A couple questions about traffic. So one thought that I have, something I've thought about before, but you might want to consider. Whitehorse Lane is a nightmare. You might want to consider either as part of this project or just as a project in general, putting a couple speed bumps in there, particularly at the intersection of Whitehorse and Anderson, or Whitehorse and Pickering. Would be very helpful. The select site, just a clarification in my mind, you all talked about this a little bit. Whether in the final determination, East Stalk is a secondary connector or a feeder or whatever, what will be the consequences for residents between the cul-de-sac and Whitehorse Road? So will there be widening of Whitehorse Road? Will that be taken by eminent domain? How would that work? Or is there a situation in which there would be no widening that road? Oh, I'm sorry. I could have walked it over to you.
So I don't know exactly how it'll turn out, but I don't see there's any reason to widen the road. And if you look at the traffic numbers that we need to update, I don't think they will require a widening of a road on East Side.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack Kane, and I live 38 Dorchester Way, which is lot number 6, I would call it. My question is the traffic. Trying to get out of Dorchester Way at 7:30 in the morning is suicide. You may get a slight gap, and that slight gap is, they're not doing 45, they're doing 60 coming down eastbound on 23. Now you're going to have cars coming out of Sedgley Lane. At the same time, people are trying to turn left it's gonna be suicide. So please look at that traffic study very carefully. Thank you.
Just add wells and magic number as well.
Yes.
845 East Phillip. So I think in the comments, there's a lot of remarks about Phillips Drive and the impact. So from a perspective of the negative impact of Phillip, think about us. Think about the sidewalks we don't have, the expansion, the eminent domain of our property, the breaking of the cul-de-sac that's been there since the 1960s. It'd be interesting to see from a traffic study perspective, the number of cameras that are caught by the school buses that drive by. So I'd like to pull the police reports on that as well. My daughter has to stand back from the stop sign because the road's too dangerous. Really, there's a lot of negative impact coming off of East Phillip on the White Horse. The dog leg that you mentioned, the sight line is very dangerous. There's been accidents by the neighbors pulling out of there to make a left. Traffic already builds. The school road brings a lot of traffic in the morning. So please put that in consideration. Stormwater is also an issue. The water comes down off South White Horse into their property. My property got flooded. The storm culvert is not big enough to handle the water, so my property already gets flooded, which is fine, but there's a lot of water that comes off of White Horse into the property. The point that you had made with the tangency of the turns, from the graph you can't see it. I look at the cul-de-sac every day. There is an angle to that drive. So I think that the study should be done to make sure that that tangency is in fact a straight through tangency. One other factor there too is he had mentioned that the subdivision, which I guess is the East Phillip Drive subdivision, has some sort of right over that cul-de-sac. Is that what I heard? So he had said that he didn't want to argue with the other neighbor in the cul-de-sac to have a straight throughway. So he uses the select plan to get through the cul-de-sac. He had said about a ownership right of that cul-de-sac. I didn't quite understand that. So who has the voting right over the use to drive through that cul-de-sac? Is it just select sites, or is it the subdivision which drives?
It's an individual right of every owner of a lot on that subdivision plan. If they wanted to extend that road through that right-of-way that was shown, they're a beneficiary of it, so they could do it. So you could do it if you wanted to connect to the Reese property. The Select Sites property can do it because there are a lot in that cul-de-sac. It's not a singular right and it's not a voting right. It's an individual right of each owner of each lot within that cul-de-sac.
So think about what he's saying there. One person of the 25 houses or whatever houses are on that street have one voting right to break through that cul-de-sac. Where's my right? I bought the house. I didn't know about this development, and I didn't know about this one right that one person can break through that cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac that's been there since 1960. Hold on, I'm speaking. Granted, it's great planning. Yeah, great planning that we put a cul-de-sac in there. But I just want to acknowledge the fact that one individual can decide to put a street through that road. Just think about that. I understand. Just practicality is law, right? I mean, you can put that back up. You're a lawyer. I get it. We're not all lawyers here. There's common sense in a lot of this. So listen, you've heard a lot, you've seen a lot. There's information you need to go through, but these are the facts of someone that actually lives there. So I appreciate that.
I have a comment on the drainage that goes.
Your name and address.
Karen Hilliard, 920 Valley Forge Road.
Where is your street? I'm sorry.
920 Valley Forge Road. So the drainage that you were referring to, that owned by two different properties in the Dorchester Road property.
Correct. That's pretty important.
So I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but when Ida came through, that very backed up, and one of the homeowners, I'm not sure which lot, tried to clear some of the debris that was blocking it to help the water go through, so his own property wasn't flooding. And he nearly lost his life due to the force of the water pushing on him while he was trying to clear that, because he was trying to protect his property from the flooding. My concern being at 920 Valley Forge Road, if that now gets connected through pipe-wise, so it won't block on his end, it's going to block on my end, and all that water, all the debris that runs through the wooded where Belmont Terrace is, it all gets backed up because of just sticks and stuff that fall from trees, leaves, trash, gets pushed through the backyards of everyone's yard and has to end up going through there. It's going to then, if it's not backing up there, it's going to back up onto my property. I'm just bringing that to everyone's attention. It might be better for some lots, but it will not be better for everyone else. And then I just had a question on the plans. There was something about reconstructing existing driveways as required on Valley Forge Road for 920 and 918. There was like a little tiny comment. Can you just clarify some information about that? So it's the two driveways, like if you were to turn out of Sedgley on to the right, it's the first two driveways. They're very close to that Sedgley entrance. Would they need to be, the driveways need to be relocated?
Thanks, good question. PennDOT, when they issued the permit last time, they asked us to provide access to, if they wanted to use our new road, to go back and forth.
So it's optional?
It was optional.
It's not required?
Not required. We gave notice to those that at the time. Yep.
Okay.
So I assume that may come out again with another permit, maybe the same thing.
Okay, so, but it was not required?
Not required. It
Okay.
was, we needed to offer to allow them to come onto the new road.
Okay. Okay, that's all.
My name is Dan Eichenwald. I live at 105 Burn Drive. That's the intersection of Burn and West Phillip. So my daughter goes to Schuylkill Elementary. Just wanted to let everybody know that she would actually be, we're a block away from the same bus stop that Mike spoke about. So we're half a mile from Schuylkill. But kids are not allowed to get off at that bus stop and cross White Horse Road. The school has acknowledged, because we questioned them, because instead my daughter she's on the bus for about 45 minutes. She is not allowed to get off at that stop and cross White Horse Road and walk 4 or 5 houses to her house. So I just wanted to make it publicly known that the school has acknowledged that that intersection is unsafe. I don't know if that factors in, but everyone should be aware that that is the school's position, public position. In addition, I come out on that intersection every single day at about 8 o'clock. That's like suicide lane.
It's like a parking lot.
It's a blind hill coming from the Schuylkill Elementary. In both directions, you have traffic coming very fast, and additional traffic on that road is very dangerous.
And Barbara, I want to clarify, it's not a parking lot, it's a freeway.
Yeah, it's
It's
exactly the
45,
opposite.
55 with concrete trucks, tractor trailers, Wawa trucks, school buses stopping. Like I said, pull the cameras, same deal, my daughter has to get on at 45 minutes earlier than school starts because she's not allowed to get on his side of the street. She's not allowed to cross the street. To leave East Phillip to go to Westville, which is the community, my wife and I and my daughter, we have to triple check before we can cross the road on a bike, on a scooter, or walking. And people walk across the street all the time to leave our subdivision, which is a cul-de-sac, to the other neighborhoods. You gotta look at that traffic study. It's very, very dangerous. That's speaking from residents that live there. And one other thing too, from the one person that makes a decision about the cul-de-sac, it's Select Site, who doesn't even live in the neighborhood. Think about that as well. So they're making a decision. Yes, they own the property, I get it, but they don't live in the neighborhood either. The impact of that to a person, a resident that lives there.
Tim Deckhouse, 169 East Pothouse Road. I attended the meeting that we had a few years back when they were proposing the 90-plus houses. This one is a lot less, but I'm still opposed to this. There's too much traffic in this particular area. There's too much traffic on Whitehorse. I live on Pothouse. The traffic goes all hours of the night. It's loud. There's buses. There's big rigs towing buses. This is just going to add more traffic to this particular part of the township. Not just the amount of cars that are going to be in the development itself, but the amount of cars that will support it, the trash trucks, the FedEx trucks, the Amazon vans. It's too much traffic. And I just am vehemently and just opposed to this development. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Rich McGuckin. I live at 1351 Patrick Henry Drive. I just have a few questions, and honestly, I don't live near the development that's being developed. I don't live near Phillips, but I can feel the pain of what's going on there. It's a pretty sad situation that's going to occur. I've been at these meetings for many years. I was here when this thing was originally looked at as a home development site, and when it was going to be sold, there was only going to be 6 houses put. I don't think Mr. Pollard was involved at that point in time, but that's what the thought was there. As prices going up, values going up on properties around this area, it was determined then to go and densify to this site location that it has now would be 50 plus houses. That was shut down by this committee before and asked to go and do the PUD, which the help there and the reason for that direction was because this particular development's gonna have a lot of kids, and at the time, the school district couldn't handle all the additional kids that was coming into it. Hence, we went through this massive building boom where we renovated our high school and all the other schools to increase capacity, but we're over capacity again. I come from the perspective that when I first moved here, my taxes were $3,200. Now they're over $10,000. And they're going to go up even more when things like this happen. You know, quite frankly, I mean, just my personal opinion, when you were looking at the PUD, where you basically consolidated the housing into certain areas, it seemed to be a better plan because it gave more open space. You mentioned about the Eagle. Eagles have revisited this area. It used to be here flourishing before. Due to DDT and some other issues, they left. They're coming back. This particular situation, I don't know how well that's going to bear with Eagles in the community, but I'm sure it's going to have some kind of impact. The whole issue with regards to going into Phillips was because of the concern of all those neighbors, they basically said, hey, here's a compromise. We'll put in a medium capacity road that only the neighbors in that particular new development, whether it be the PUD or the 50 plus houses, had access to, one way. And what they're trying to do is minimize the issues with traffic, issues with having people driving through that neighborhood. The bigger concern is you're adding 50 plus houses. My question is, how large are these houses? How many bedrooms do these houses have? How many bathrooms? What's the impact on our sewer? Do you have EFUs for that? With respect to the number of people, drivers, how many cars are going to add to it? You're talking about probably at least another 100 cars, assuming everyone has 2 cars nowadays. So it's a huge impact from a road infrastructure standpoint. If you remember, the Delaware Valley Christian School had a property on 23, which they tried to convert into a senior community. Everybody got together, basically said, hey, look, it's a phenomenal property. We want to keep it as it is. Yes, you can add houses. Now, in that particular case, they weren't able to put the sewer in, so the houses had to be on a minimum of 2.5 or there's something like 2 acres or 3 acres because they had septic. All right? In this particular case, they have terrific access to the sewer, so hence we have 50-some plus properties. I'd love to see you go back there and try to cut that back to 2 or 3 acre minimums. It would keep the number of people down. You'll still be able to maximize the value of the property. Won't have that issue. I mean, I just had a lot of specific questions here. I don't want to take the next 2 minutes for that, but I just asked you guys to think about it. This is like 50 first dates. We've been through this already before. We went down the path, we kind of went through this battle, and it was determined that if it were to be developed, there was a gentleman here that was going to buy that property at one point in time so that none of this would be developed. And I don't know what happened to that guy. I need to get back in touch with him to find out if that's still the case, but that's assuming that Mr. Polig's willing to release it. But, you know, that's one of the last few open spaces we have. And by the way, it's next to our drinking water that we all drink out of. So I know there's talk about reducing fertilizer, but you know, there's trash and there's runoff. There's a whole bunch of things that occur that would affect that water quality. And you know, the whole idea of the recharge basin, I thought, was what the direction we're going before, with having all that open space with the planned urban development. So therefore, it'd have the water be able to pool, you wouldn't have the runoff issues, and it'd be able to address all of that. So I think we need to dust off the 2008 notes and go back and look at it and say, why did we decide to go in that direction? Because that was the better direction. If it had to be developed, it reduced the impact on the schools, reduced the impact on the environment, and at the end of the day, it still got Mr. Polig the number of properties that he needed to, I guess, make this development work. The plus side was we had open trails, we had access to the property as a community. There was a wider bridge that was put in, so we didn't have to have a walk around or anything like that. And it kept the folks in the adjacent neighborhood happy because at least it minimized it. I don't know if no's the answer. I don't think you're going to get a no here. I'd like to give them a no. Absolutely like to give them a no. I'd rather have it open. But we need to really think about how can we manage this thing that has the most minimal impact on everybody, and especially that neighborhood that's adjacent to it. I don't think that's fair. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I don't know if you insist. Hi, Sue Ironshield. I live across the street at
Across the street where?
130 Valley Park. Across the street with the white fence. And and I'm already concerned about my neighbor and his 300 acres and what might happen there. And then we have this. But my question was, you mentioned that water was already running over 50 feet of land or something before it got to the pipes, or when you were talking about the pipes between the two properties on Dorchester.
If I could, I'll speak up a little bit, hopefully it works, so I can point at the same time. There's a drainage area that comes probably from here, that kind of goes through a lot of this drainage, and it goes through, there's an existing, I think it's 24 inch, 16 inch, something like that, pipe there right now. So the idea with this development is we'll be able to take some of the water that's going that direction. We're going to capture it on this and keep it on our site. The idea is to reduce the amount of water that was headed down there and have the post-development be a better condition than pre-development going through there. Whether we connect the pipes in the end or we leave them open, it's something we're happy to take a look at. But we won't increase the amount of water that's being delivered right there, right now.
Okay.
And right, I can tell you, I kind of knew that unfortunate incident, and what had happened was a lot of the stuff blocked the culvert that was there. I was able to help out a little bit, and I got permission kind of to go in. Nobody really owns that 50-foot strip, whatever that road is there. And we were able to clean up, cut some dead trees and some of those kind of things, try to help that in the future. One of the things that needs to happen is we need to make sure that those inlets are maintained and don't back up. And some of the other neighbors appreciate that.
And as far as the stormwater on the section closer to the reservoir, the larger section, what kind of flooding has that experienced in the past? Well, especially, as he was saying, with the climate change and the storms just getting more intense, and White Horse Road is basically just a floodplain.
Yeah, there are, obviously, there's a 100-foot flood level. You know, is that going to go up in the future? I believe it will, but it won't be in terms of feet at this location, just because of the amount of, just because of the width of the dam going over. All our
Actually wiped out.
all our 23 homes, all our homes are way above the flood level here. And
That's
Aqua
good to
asked
know.
if we could exit our stormwater management, even though we're going to be uphill from it, if we could exit it down at the water level right now. What they want to do is make sure that there's no sedimentation that happens inside the.
Have you considered permeable asphalt, concrete?
I know about all that stuff.
I'm sure you do.
Well, I'm sort of in that. It's one of my passions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just at the Villanova Stormwater Symposium. A lot of those pervious, one of the negatives about pervious is that eventually it gets blocked up. There's a lot of other things that we can utilize to help out in a lot of different ways. If you can do the maintenance on that pervious way,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Small things.
They have a lot of studies down there,
Mhm.
and a lot of things on the campus right now. They've had pervious
Mhm.
and impervious.
Pavers and.
They have all kinds of, for years they've been, have cases on that.
Mhm. And then the last question was, how do you plan on policing your homeowners on the products that they use on their property that won't go into our drinking water?
Yeah, so with the PRD plans, we had a good idea how we could do that, because we had homeowner association property that was
Mhm.
doing the homes, and it's gonna be a little bit more difficult here, but we'll try to figure out, I don't know how we're gonna do it.
I don't either. And again, that's a drinking water, and our wildlife's water. Anyway,
But right now it's farmed, and so it's just a runoff from the farm.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Just want to say too, that, tonight, there are a lot of people who are going to show up. Unfortunately, didn't because of the Phillies game. So there is going to be another meeting of the minds here, I would assume, given these changes that were discussed. So hopefully there'll be adequate notice so that more people can come and basically discuss their bids. Because I can tell you there's a lot of people that are interested in this.
Okay. Anyone on the planning commission have anything else? As you stated earlier, you really weren't looking for us to do a recommendation this evening. And you're going to meet with township staff and work through a lot of the comments and stuff and make revisions to the plans and get those in so we can get a review, hopefully addressing a majority of the comments in the letters and so on.
Yeah, I mean, we'll treat this like we would have if we were back in 2008. We
Yeah.
get a review letter, we meet, we respond to it, we give revisions if we think they're the appropriate thing to do from those comments. That comes back in, gets reviewed, and eventually you get to a point where you either recommend approval or disapproval. Excuse me. A lot of times it's an approval, recommending approval with compliance with conditions that are in the letter that are easier to just resolve at the final, show on the final plan. But requirement that you do it is in the engineer's letter and so forth. So this, I mean, from our standpoint, this is, even though it's been in abeyance for as long as it is, we're just back doing the normal process.
Right.
I'll just say one thing, it would be helpful if you take a look at the alternate plan, because a lot of things that we're gonna do here would make sense on one plan and not another. So if we could get a sense from the township on a direction on the alternates, we could filter that into a lot of the resolutions.
That would be a good idea.
Except that we, until we get that alternate plan approved by the supervisors, we still have to have the basic
Right.
plan that's compliant in all respects.
Right.
Sorry, one more question. I don't think you addressed what size the houses are going to be.
That is undetermined at this time. My guess is we're well over $1 million probably houses. We're not gonna do the product again. We did that back in 2008. We're gonna wait till we know what we're doing here. And at that point, we'll
What
talk
size
about
are the lots?
it. The minimum size, 35,000 square foot.
Less than
Yep. The R1 zoning, just like your Dorchester.
So what is your unit per acre, acreage count on this? Is 2 units per acre, 1 unit per acre for the overall site?
I missed that, I'm sorry.
51 lots, 66 acres. So 16 and 51 is basically 3 something, so about 7/10 of a unit an acre.
Okay.
But you don't know.
So you're not trying to crowd a lot of things into a space.
What?
You're not crowding a lot of units into a space.
It's reasonable dense.
Very dense.
That's dense.
On not quite an acre.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many square foot?
It ain't well enough.
It's not 20,000,
For $1 million?
So the density is something a little less than a unit per acre, is what we're coming up with here. So,
Right.
so when you look at the way, with the land that's involved, the open space and so on, that you are getting basically, we'll call it 1 acre zoning.
Yes,
Which-
but,
yeah.
but if you took the, I guess I need that for a second. If you took the basic rule of thumb of the number of units, if you took the minimum lot size and divided that into the acreage, you would get a potential yield. And then if you take like 80% of that number, that would be your rule of thumb anticipated yield because of roads and so forth. We're not there.
Yeah.
I guess the only other comment that I could make to this whole entire presentation is, I haven't heard one comment out of this presentation of this project of what it's doing to benefit the community. And you have a very controversial project in front of you because you're moving in through a neighborhood that's been kind of like one of those quiet little streets in the suburbs that people have, known to love and enjoy, whether you live on the street or not. And you're putting in a fair amount of traffic coming in through the side street. And it drives me crazy that your drawing, by the way, is not north up, but on the north side of the site. Yeah, I've been trying to do that all night. Maybe it's just my profession, I don't know, but I'm used to reading it that way. But I think part of what you have to come back to us with is what's the value to the community of doing this project?
Well, let me answer
And
that
if
for
it-
you. Let me answer that for you real quickly. The municipality decided what was the by right development potential and proper uses of this zone. They've determined legislatively that whatever the impacts of that use are, they're acceptable. They're what the township anticipates by zoning it that way. This is not the type of use where you have to provide why you're different or why you're providing something. You're just doing what the municipality has said, this is what we see being done here, this is what we want by creating this zone. That's why you have.
I understand the legal ease of it all. All I'm doing is from a recommendation standpoint,
Every year.
there isn't any, there's got to be a value proposition to the community, and it would be nice to hear what that value proposition is in you trying to sell it. Just a suggestion. You don't have to do it. You're right. It's zoned residential. You can put whatever you want in from a residential perspective, and our job is to evaluate it, whether or not it's meeting with the water concerning standpoints, the life safety of our people, and environmental. So we will judge it from that perspective, I am sure. But I just feel that it would help your case.
I understand what you're saying. What I'm trying to say to you is the benefit to the community is we're doing what the community has asked us to do.
Right. Right. Right.
The community did not ask you for a 50-house development, 50-plus house development. Who asked you that?
You're doing what the community.
You're doing what your
permitted you to do.
Who asked you that?
Let's
I think-
confine the shout-outs to come
Yeah,
up and
that's-
say something to the microphone.
Yeah, it's not appropriate.
We're still 50 minutes early, I can see.
So what would the next steps be here,
Do
Kurt?
we have, excuse me,
I'm sorry, Kurt, what would the next steps be? I mean, just so we're all clear on,
they're going to work with the township engineer and the township staff and township solicitor Bill Brennan and work on addressing the comments in the review letters and working out the disagreements on how things are applied and so on. They're going to submit a plan with a letter. We'll get another review, and we'll have another meeting in November.
If it all gets done by November, it'll be November. If it all gets done by December, it'll be December. If an extension is needed for the township's time to act, I've already indicated to Mr. Brennan that that's not a problem.
Right.
Right. I would like to add a postscript. Having lived here for 49 years, we wanted to have PennDOT widen Route 23 in the 1990s. We had a regional group when I was leading the Phoenixville Area Chamber of Commerce. The only thing that we could get from PennDOT was a $2 million grant that I wrote for them, to them, and the lights on Route 23 are timed. So having had to get out from Davis Road onto Route 23 for all these years, it's getting worse. So my feeling is positive aspect would be to get PennDOT to actually treat the state road in a better way by putting traffic lights in as a planning mechanism. So that would be safer for the inhabitants, whatever street they live on. We all use Route 23 one time of the day or not. So they're realistic things that we can petition PennDOT to do, having worked with them for many, many years. That would be beneficial to the community, getting them to do the right thing.
Right, but
The
that's-
traffic light
what does that
instead
have
of
to
a
do with
stop
this
sign.
development?
It has, because it's a new development, it gives strength to the township and working in a regional way. I worked a long time in, it's not just my backyard, it's the backyards and front yards of neighboring communities. As we work together as a region, we can petition PennDOT to do better traffic planning than has been conducted. The timed lights on Route 23 were put in 1996 when I got that grant. That's a long time ago.
That's just rebut there, I guess.
Well-
But I'm sorry, respectfully though, on that comment, isn't the point of the planning committee to also plan in accordance with PennDOT?
Most definitely.
Your request there would be PennDOT, a future ask of PennDOT to provide to the township, which isn't granted. As a commission, as a planning commission, your job is to plan in accordance with what we have today.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to rebut kind of that argument a little bit and make that clear.
Right.
Steve Kunz from the Environmental Advisory Council. Somebody was saying, well, where does this go next from here? Well, the very next thing, maybe not for the Planning Commission is, but next week on Tuesday, Todd Polich and his crew will be presenting to the Environmental Advisory Council. And we are preparing a comment letter that'll have to be in draft form for that meeting. But we have a lot of comments and concerns to discuss next Tuesday with the applicant. I was glad to hear some of the studies are being updated, the wetland study, the Pindy study. I guess I have a question about one of the concerns that the EAC had originally about the wetland study, and we still have about the wetland studies, is that it was mostly focused on the Reeves property. And of course, if you go just off the Reeves property here, you're onto Aqualand, which is reservoir and additional wetlands. So originally they said, there are no wetlands on the property, which was correct. But it wasn't correct to say there were no wetlands involved with the project because, the Eagles Point Boulevard crosses an easement across Aqua's land, and there were wetlands there. So I'm hoping that the updated wetland study will look not only at the Reeves property, but the Aqua land as well.
And we did that. The latest wetland study was over on to Aqua's property.
All right, we haven't seen that. We saw something for select sites. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
For
Yeah.
that little 7 flags?
No. So
Okay.
we'll make sure it's included. We
Yeah.
agree with that.
All right, and we look forward to discussing things with you next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
I would just add one more thing, sorry. I didn't think your memo was the least bit vague.
Okay. I guess procedurally, do we need to officially table this, or we just?
Discussion.
You're right.
You would just move on to your next item on your agenda if there is one, and if not, you'd adjourn.
Can I just ask one last question real quick? Why is there not, or can there not be a homeowners association for this project?
I didn't say there would be or would.
Oh, okay. All right, because you were saying that the PRD had a homeowners association, and that, was good because you could, require
The
not
homeowners
using.
association owned a large chunk of land which acted as a buffer from the residential properties to the reservoir. In this case, the residential lands go to the edge of the property.
Right.
That's what Todd was talking about as being beneficial under the PRD for quality stormwater management.
But there could be a homeowners association here?
Likely will be.
Likely, yeah.
Okay, good, thanks.
That would be very helpful.
Sure, they'll tell us when to take the Christmas lights down, when to put the trash cans away, all that stuff, all the good stuff.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you to the
Thank
public
you.
for all your
motion to
input.
adjourn.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, I want to stay.